For spine-chilling, terrifying park ranger encounters, revealed secrets from haunted wilderness, they heard whispers of the dark corners of the Appalachian Mountains, stories brimming with dread that sent shivers down the spine. Now, the Johnson family, lured by adventure and the quest for connection, stood on that precipice. Driving through the twisting roads of North Carolina, the kids squealed with excitement, but a feeling gnawed at the parents, an instinct they couldn't shake off. As they parked and stepped out, the cicadas buzzed furiously around them, and the clean scent of pine mingled with a foreboding chill deep in their stomachs. They set up their tent near a glimmering creek, the water rippling softly beneath the flickering twilight. Everything was peaceful at first. But then he appeared, Ranger Hank, his wide grin unsettling against the backdrop of looming trees. He approached them with an odd familiarity of their campsite, his voice calm yet laced with an intensity that raised goosebumps along their arms. "I've watched many families come and go in these woods." He leaned closer, shifting the atmosphere away from welcoming to unnerving. "Some never leave." A nervous laugh escaped one of the parents, an attempt to brush off the uneasy feeling his presence stirred. Yet Hank continued, weaving tales saturated with horror stories of families swallowed whole by the forest, never to return. "They say the trees they whisper, some call them the whispering shadows." The words hung in the air, coating them with a surreal dread. Night fell quickly, darkness creeping in like smoke, while their laughter faded into anxious whispers. Shadows danced around the flickering flames of their campfire, distorting shapes and igniting primal fears. As the warmth of the fire dwindled and darkness descended, something stirred in the distance, an echoing laughter, twisted with cries that seemed to come from the very heart of the woods. The adults exchanged tormented glances, comfort blending into silent terror as they huddled closer under their sleeping bags. Then, Ranger Hank reappeared, his demeanor sliding into something sinister. "Stay by the fire," he warned, leaning uncomfortably close. "Some wander into the trees, thinking the forest is friendly, but it isn't." His eyes betrayed a hint of something deeper, as if they held secrets older than time itself. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue with the Ranger's warning echoing in their minds, unease wrapped around the family like a constricting snake. The kids, once brimming with joy, now sensed a prickling awareness of something lurking. They clung to one another as shadows expanded menacingly. Just a moment of distraction to gather firewood, and everything changed. One terrified scream pierced the night, the anguished cry of little Maggie, who had vanished without a trace. Panic surged through the parents, hearts racing. They spun towards the dark brush as despair clawed at them. Was it better to heed the ranger's warning or plunge into the terrifying unknown of the darkened woods? Shadows shifted and stretched toward them, like fingers reaching out to grab them, and they quickly realized that the true threat lay deeper, concealed in the twisted designs of the very forest that surrounded them. As silence enveloped them, they faced the ghastly truth: they were not alone, and there was something waiting for them in the dark, something that breathed, watching, lurking just beyond the firelight. Would they ever find Maggie? Or would they discover the forest's secret, and lose everything in the process? Terror gnawed at the Johnsons as the night deepened, settling thickly around them like fog. The parents exchanged frantic glances, their hearts racing. How could little Maggie just disappear? The forest, once a backdrop for adventure, now loomed ominously, its towering trees whispering secrets they weren't meant to hear. "Stay close," whispered Brian, gripping his wife's arm tightly. "We have to find her." Tammy nodded, eyes wide with fear. What if something took her? Ranger Hank's stories, what if they were true? She felt a cold sweat trickle down her back as they stepped away from the safety of the fire. With only flashlights in hand, they felt exposed, illuminated against the encroaching darkness. The shadows seemed to flick and swirl, alive with a consciousness that sent chills racing up their spines. "Maggie! Can you hear us?" Brian yelled, pushing through the brush. His voice cracked, swallowed by the pressing silence as the forest answered with a low rustle, something both familiar and alien at once. Echoes returned the sound of their desperation, distorted as if mocking them. The darker patches within the woods seemed to pulse, breathing as if aware of their intrusion. An unsettling smell brushed by, a mix of damp earth and decay. "Maggie!" cried Tammy, her voice trembling, each syllable laced with growing dread. "Keep moving, we'll find her," Brian managed to say, though uncertainty gripped his throat tighter with each passing second. They pressed deeper into the woods, the trees thickening around them, their roots like crooked fingers clawing at the ground. A sudden snap of a twig diverted their attention. They froze, their breaths hitching in their throats. In the haunting quiet, a soft giggle fluttered through the air, Maggie's laughter, way too close and yet impossibly distant. "Over there." Brian pointed into the blackness where the sound had come from. "Are you sure?" Tammy hesitated, fear pooling in her stomach as she glanced back toward the campsite, feeling utterly exposed. "Trust me." He took a step toward the sound, an invitation into the dark that felt like stepping off the edge of a cliff. In the distance, a flicker of pale light danced erratically, almost like fireflies, but they were slow and deliberate. "My little girl," Tammy murmured. "We have to." Before she could finish, the giggle rang out again, an insidious echo that twisted her stomach with unease. "Maggie? Stay right here." Brian's voice was firm, yet trembling. He gestured towards the glow, his heart racing against the frantic warnings in his mind. As they moved towards it, the whispers morphed into distorted voices, frantic laughter mingled with snarls. They felt an urgent pull, a grossly intimate sensation, like the woods themselves were beckoning them deeper into the maw of darkness. The trees shifted, their branches creaking like old bones, as if wrestling with the wind or perhaps something else entirely. "Maggie!" Tammy's voice broke. "We need to go back." This isn't, but Brian wasn't listening. The allure of the light was too strong, and it drew him in with an icy grip. They stumbled into a small clearing where the luminescence flickered wildly and stopped, revealing something horrific. Something that made their blood run cold. Just ahead lay strange markings on the ground, an intricate pattern that looked almost like an ancient sigil, and at its center, a doll, Maggie's doll, its button eyes unblinking, a sinister smile stitched into its face. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed around them, and the very air thickened, as shadows unfurled from the trees, coiling, pulsing, gathering strength. Tammy gasped as she felt something brush against her leg, a coldness, a presence that shouldn't exist. "Brian," she whispered, terror clawing up her throat. But as he turned to face her, the world twisted violently, plunging them deeper into a nightmare. The forest held its breath, the shadows hungered, and in the grip of this fear, a choice loomed before them: wade deeper into doom or return to the campfire's pitiful light, where the true horror awaited. What awaited them? In the dark? Would they dare to uncover what the forest wanted? The silence was suffocating, wrapping around them like a serpent. Tammy's heart pounded in her chest as she clutched Brian's arm. The forest seemed to breathe, the shadows stretching and curling like tendrils ready to snatch them away. "Do you see it?" Brian's voice trembled, his flashlight flickering over the patterns in the damp earth. "It looks ancient." "Brian, we shouldn't be here. We need to go back," Tammy insisted, fighting the rising panic in her throat. The shadows danced around them, pulsing with a malevolence that felt almost alive. He stepped closer to the sigil, drawn as if by a magnet. "Maggie's doll, why is it here? This doesn't make sense." Tammy felt a surge of desperation. "It's not about the doll. It's about our daughter. We have to find her." The words clawed their way out, filled with urgency. But Brian remained transfixed, staring at the doll as if it held the answers to questions that threatened to devour them whole. The air thickened, brimming with an oppressive weight. The trees whispered their sinister secrets, each rustle sounding like a warning. From behind them, the soft laughter Maggie's laughter broke the heavy silence, echoing in a taunting cadence. It was a sound that should have brought comfort, but instead filled them with dread. Brian's eyes widened. "Did you hear that? It's coming from over there." He pointed toward the brush that seemed to ripple with dark potential. "But Brian, what if it's not her?" What if before she could finish, Brian bolted toward the sound, pushing through the underbrush. "Maggie!" he called out, his voice echoing against the trees. Tammy hesitated, fear tightening its grip around her heart. The time to go back ticked away, but the urge to follow her husband consumed her. "Wait!" she yelled, but her voice was drowned out by the forest's cacophony, a chorus of whispers that echoed around them, taunting, beckoning. As she rushed to catch up, a sudden chill slithered up her spine. Something was watching them. She turned but saw only shadows flickering behind the trees, as if they were alive, waiting for their chance. "Brian!" She finally reached him, her breath coming in frantic bursts. "We shouldn't be this far." The fire he turned, his face pale and tense. "Look!" In his hand was another doll, its surface caked with dirt like the one they had found, but this one had its eyes gouged out and threads hanging loose from its seams. "Tammy, this means something else, something wrong." Before she could respond, a sound like whispering intensified, swirling around them, intertwining with Maggie's laughter in a discordant symphony of terror. A form began to materialize in the distance, cloaked in darkness. The shadows clung to it like a second skin, revealing piercing eyes that glimmered with a terrifying hunger. "Who's there?" Brian called, but his voice wavered, uncertainty creeping in. The figure stepped closer, its mouth twisting into a sickly sweet smile, one that paralyzed the air around them. "You've come seeking your child?" It hissed, the words dripping with venom. Tammy felt bile rise in her throat. "What have you done to her?" she shrieked, fear spiraling into fury, every instinct screaming at her to flee. But the being merely chuckled, a sound that set her nerves on fire. "She is one with us now." The shadows lunged, coiling around Brian and Tammy like rubber bands about to snap just as everything went dark. The last flicker of the flashlight dimmed as they were enveloped. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. And then a new sound, a soft whisper echoed through the clearing, a promise, and a threat: "You can never leave." What have they awakened in this cursed ground? Would they ever see their daughter again? Or had the woods decided their fate? A presence, cold and suffocating, pressed in on Tammy and Brian like a wet blanket. Their bodies felt heavy, as if the very air had conspired against them. Darkness enveloped them with an almost physical force, turning everything into an inky void. Their moments of terror hung in the air, each second stretched into an eternity. "Brian!" Tammy's voice cracked as she reached for him, but her hand grasped nothing but air. Panic surged, flood-like, rising to choke her throat. "Where are you?" Brian's voice responded, but it sounded distant, wavering like a mirage. "Tammy, I can't see you. Are you there?" "I'm right here." The ground became uneven beneath her feet, a sickening tilt that sent her heart racing. "We need to get out. Please, Brian." The whispers returned, this time sharper, clearer, swirling around her like a cyclone of malice. They taunted her, blending with the echoes of Maggie's laughter. Each laugh carried a note of evil, twisting and nodding in her mind. "Come play with us forever." Tammy's heart thundered. "Shut up!" she screamed, flailing against the darkness, desperate to escape the clutches of the unseen thing that toyed with her sanity. "Brian!" Her voice cracked as a searing pain shot through her chest, a sudden revelation gnawing at her ribs like a rat gnawing through wood. "We're trapped. Whatever that is, it doesn't want us to leave." Brian's voice wove through the dark, thick with dread. We have to find each other. Step forward. I can't. A deafening silence engulfed him. The world around Tammy twisted and contorted, the shadows squeezing tighter, suffocating her logic. She staggered blindly, her pulse echoing in her temples, moving toward the faint sound that could have been Brian's voice or maybe just a cruel imitation meant to lead her further into despair. "Stay with me," she whispered, the words almost wedged in her throat. Suddenly, a flicker of light burst forth, the flashlight. Flickering back to life but with a sickly green hue. It cast everything in an eerie glow. When she found it, it was bobbing and swaying, floating just above a doll lying in the dirt. The eyes gouged out from the last doll were now glaring at her, furious yet resigned. "Please. I'm here," she screamed, reaching out, but the light flickered wildly and vanished. Her surroundings snapped into a horrifying clarity. Ghostly faces emerged from the shadows, their mouths twisted into grotesque expressions. "Leave us, leave her," they hissed, shrieks melding into the wind's lament. Terror rooted Tammy to the ground, yet the urgent need to find Brian propelled her forward. She fought against the tide of shadows, breathing heavily, tears streaming down her face. "Maggie! Just show me where she is." A chaotic cacophony erupted, laughter becoming thunderous wails. The shadows pulled her deeper into their embrace, the weight of despair forcing her back toward the sigil, a maelstrom of darkness encircling her. "Brian." Then, another horrifying whisper emerged from the depths, a voice that was not her own but echoed deep and personal. "You must choose to save one or both." The darkness throbbed around her, the presence of something omnipotent, something that toyed with fear and hope alike. The ground beneath her trembled, and from the earth, hands began to rise, skeletal and claw-like, reaching for her. Tammy stood paralyzed, teetering on the edge of horror. Could she find Brian in this chaos, or would she be pulled into the abyss, grasping at shadows of a daughter that may never be found? The chilling laughter swirled louder, promising temptation, promising freedom, but at an unspeakable price. What choice would she make? And would it be enough to reclaim the love she had lost, or would the woods forever bind them in darkness? The hands grasped at her, icy fingertips threatening to drag her into the ground. Panic sliced through Tammy, and she stumbled backwards, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm in her chest. The oppressive darkness thickened, coiling around her. "Brian!" she cried out, desperation clawing at her throat. But the shadows only echoed her fears, morphing into a discordant chorus of whispers. "Choose, choose." A sudden burst of clarity shot through her mind. "I want to choose," she declared fiercely, her voice shaking yet unwavering. "We can find a way out. Together." As the last word left her lips, she turned on her heel, the flickering green light igniting again, casting twisted shadows across the ground. The flashlight's glow revealed a forest alive with torment. Gnarled trees reached for her like monstrous arms, their branches dripping with sinister intent. They whispered her daughter's name, a haunting melody replete with sorrow. "Maggie, Maggie." Tammy swallowed hard, reverberations of anguish cutting into her heart. "Stay away. I want to let you take her." She squeezed the flashlight, its fragile light trembling against the encroaching darkness. Suddenly, a raucous laughter pierced through, sharp and cruel. "You think you can defy us? You think we care for your love?" Shadows swirled, and from the ground emerged a figure cloaked in the same dark shroud. It wore a face not of flesh but a distorted amalgamation of every fear she ever harbored. Tammy froze, a primal dread coiling in her gut. "What are you?" she demanded, though her voice trembled. It grinned with a mouth that seemed to stretch forever. "Guardian of the trapped, seeker of the lost. Would you abandon your child?" At that, a fresh wave of emotion surged through her. "You don't know me," she shouted defiantly. "I'd die before I abandon her." The figure chuckled darkly, its voice a slither of silk filled with poison. "But you were already dead the moment you stepped into this realm." An icy blast of wind spiraled around Tammy, tangled and cold, heart-wrenching memories. She saw flashes of Maggie, her laughter flooding the darkness and reminding her of the life they shared. But each vision warped, twisted into grotesque parodies of what was once joyful. The laughter grew louder, engulfing her. Fighting back terror, Tammy stumbled forward. "I'm coming for you, Maggie. I will not leave without you." Each step felt like a challenge against the dark entity's grasp. It tugged at her, threading icy tendrils around her ankles. Then she felt something warm against her leg. Confusion flickered in her mind until she looked down. A faint glimmer caught her eye, the glow of the doll from earlier. "It's just a doll. You can't hold me here," she screamed, kicking free of its chilling grasp. But in that instant, visions of futures lost flashed before her eyes, Maggie growing up without her, each Christmas alone, each birthday dimmed by absence. "Make your choice." The looming figure roared, casting an even deeper shadow over them. "You will never escape unless you accept our gift." Tammy gasped as she felt a twinge in her heart, the weight of her decision pressing down. "You're lying," she insisted, stepping back. "I'll never trade her for anything." The laughter echoed, rippling through the shadows. But within that laughter, she heard something else, Brian's voice, faint but persistent, echoing through the clamor. "Tammy. Hold on." This broke through the haze, a lifeline she could cling to. "Brian. Where are you?" The darkness paused for just a moment, and then the malevolent whispers rose again, a chaotic storm swirling around her. "You are running out of time." The landscape began to churn violently, shadows twisting, warping reality. A choice loomed before her with the weight of graves. Could she hold on to her sanity? Could she trust the faint hope emerging from the void? She braced herself for the choice ahead. But what was truth? What was illusion? Her heart raced, caught between the haunting past and a future dripping with despair. What price would she pay for love? And as the darkness receded slightly, she realized. Sometimes, being brave means making impossible decisions that would echo through eternity. Would she discover the strength to face the truth, or would the darkness engulf them both? Tammy's heart thundered in her chest, each beat a reminder of the time slipping through her fingers like sand. The shadows swirled, their whispers escalating into a cacophony that clawed at her mind. Choose. The walls of reality pressed in, boiling her insides with dread. "No!" she yelled. She had to focus, had to find Brian, but where was he? Light. Light would guide her. She willed herself forward, flashlight in hand, its beam slicing through the murky gloom that threatened to devour her whole. With every step, the air grew heavier, suffocating. The laughter of the shadows wrapped around her, mocking her determination. "You think you can fight the inevitable?" It sneered, echoing with layers of voices that seemed to at once comfort and terrify. But amidst the pressure, a glimmer caught her eye. There, crumpled by a twisted tree root, was what she recognized as Brian's fishing hat. Her breath hitched. It felt like a lifeline thrown into the abyss. She scrambled toward it, her hands trembling as they brushed against the tattered fabric. "Brian!" she screamed again, desperation thickening her voice. "Tammy!" The whisper came from everywhere and nowhere, like a ghost slipping through her fingers. It sent chills down her spine, the sound dancing eerily with the wind. It felt like an invitation, a spark of hope that blindsided her senses. Out of the periphery of her vision, a figure emerged from the dark, a silhouette, familiar yet shadowy. "Maggie?" she called hesitantly, the tremor in her voice betraying her. But the shape morphed, becoming the malevolent entity that had just taunted her. It leaned closer. "Would you really own the truth behind the veil?" it hissed, its distorted face quivering with excitement. "Abandon the illusion of hope, for it is frail." "No. I won't believe you." Tammy shot back, her voice a shield against the creeping doubt. But even as the words burst forth, uncertainty loomed. What if she had already lost them both? With each breath, the shadows gathered, their claws inching closer. They twisted, tightening her chest. "Make your choice," they cried, their voices scratching like nails on a chalkboard. Desperation ignited inside her. "I don't need your choice," she shouted, swinging the flashlight wildly, sending the beam racing over the gnarled trees. "I will find them." Tammy turned abruptly, her heart igniting with a fierce resolve, determined to break the lure of despair binding her. The forest morphed around her, the ground trembled, nearly throwing her off balance. An echo, was it laughter, or a sob? She strained her ears as the laughter melded into cries, a mix of memories and losses flooding back. "Maggie!" Tears blurred her vision, wetting her cheeks. "I won't abandon you." The world began to twist, the shadows collapsing as if her words had disturbed something ancient. A wind howled, whipping her hair around her face, pulling back the veil of darkness just for a moment. In the sudden clarity, she caught sight of the doll again, lying in the grass, its glassy eyes staring up at her. This doll held the key to something she felt it deep in her bones. What if it was a vessel of hope? Then, the figure leapt forward, face stretching impossibly wide, a grotesque grin signaling its primal hunger. "What will you do, Tammy? Will you sacrifice it all?" Tammy felt her grip tighten on the flashlight, a choice hung heavier than a stone around her neck. Did she dare embrace the truth? But she heard a faint call again, "Brian." The darkness swirled around her, and the weight of her decision pressed down like a vice. Would she use the doll to confront the specter? "Time is almost up," the lurking threat whispered, its voice dripping with malice, slipping into her thoughts like poison. With adrenaline surging, Tammy squared her shoulders. She could not buckle now. "I'll find you, Brian. I promise." But as the shadows thickened, a sickening thought struck her. What if she was destined to choose? What if the darkness had already chosen her? Tammy gripped the flashlight tighter, knuckles blanching against the cold metal as the shadowy figure loomed closer. Heart racing, she fought against the instinct to flee, daring to stand her ground. The grotesque grin widened, exposing rows of jagged teeth that gleamed like bone-white knives. "Tammy, time waits for no one," the figure hissed, a rancid breath washing over her, suffocating her resolve. The doll lay just behind her, temptation twisting her insides. Could it really be a weapon? A tool against this monstrosity? For a moment, dread turned her thoughts into a chaotic storm. Brian's voice echoed again, softer but desperate, a thread pulling her back to clarity. She couldn't escape this place, not yet. She wouldn't let the darkness win. "I chose to fight," she cried, the words igniting an unexpected spark within her. She darted toward the doll, each step feeling like a leap into some unseen abyss. The whispers of the shadows shrieked in protest, their claws reaching for her. Grabbing the doll, its porcelain surface felt warm, strangely comforting in the face of her nightmare. The air vibrated with a sudden pulse, the darkness quaking around her. "What is it?" she thought, searching the doll's empty gaze for answers. "Dare you awaken it?" The figure teased, its voice slithering through the air like smoke. The shadows leaned closer, hungry eyes glimmering from their depths. Tammy clutched the doll, heart hammering like a drum. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, the flashlight trembling in her grip. "Your truth, your sacrifice. Show me what you would give to save them." The entity roared, and abruptly the forest erupted with a cacophony of memories. Laughter turned to sobs, light twisted into shadows, and warmth turned into biting cold. Visions surged forth, Brian, Maggie, their faces intertwined with unfamiliar specters that pulled at her soul. She staggered, unable to separate reality from nightmare, the shadows blurring everything she held dear. "Brian!" she screamed again, a rawness spilling from her throat. But the only response was the echo of her fear, ricocheting against the trees like gunshots. "Every precious moment, every breath can be traded," the entity whispered, inching closer, eyes gleaming with sadistic curiosity. What will you give me, Tammy? She fought the rising tide of despair threatening to drown her thoughts. Could she willingly let go of what she loved for something so formidable? Does the price ensure safety, or seal a fate worse than the darkness? In her mind, a flash of courage ignited. I'll sacrifice my fear. My doubts. I will not give you Brian or Maggie. I want tea. The flashlight flickered violently, a burst of power coursing through her, illuminating the space around the monstrous figure. Shadows recoiled, hissing and screeching as if burnt by the light. Tammy felt the darkness retreat, for just a moment, unraveling into nothingness. But then the shadows raged back, stronger, angrier. Foolish girl. The specter roared, arms spanning wide. You think you control the veil? You dance upon the strings of despair. The doll in her hands began to vibrate violently, a blinding light emanating from its core. What is happening? Panic bubbled inside her. She squeezed her eyes shut, fear clutching her heart as she braced for the worst. In an instant, a whirlwind engulfed her, time suspended in chaos before it shattered into silence. Then, she was free-falling through the dark, but to where? The sensation of cold air rushed past her, mingling with the stench of rotting leaves and moss. Panic surged again. Is this it? She thought, dread looming. A scream ripped through the silence, echoing. Not hers. Tammy. Brian's voice. Desperation clawed at her insides as she spiraled downwards, racing against the shadows once more. Where was he? What awaited? Then she heard them voices, whispers intertwining with the wind, chanting something sinister. Choose what choice? What truth? And just when she thought it couldn't get worse, the ground appeared beneath her, the darkness swallowing her whole again. Only this time, a single glimmer flared to life ahead. A door? What lay behind it? Tammy's heart thundered. She was plunging into another nightmare, and this time, she had to decide. Was it the door to salvation or the gateway to her darkest fears? The door loomed before her, ominous and heavy, bathed in a flickering, almost otherworldly light. Tammy's pulse raced as she reached out, fingers brushing against the cool, rough surface. Would it lead to Brian? Would it bring her closer to the answers she so desperately needed? Tammy. Brian's voice echoed again, a desperate plea that twisted the very air around her. She hesitated, thoughts colliding like dark clouds in a storm. Behind her, shadows writhed, spitting venomous promises of despair and agony. The whispers rose, seductive yet sinister. Choose wisely, they mocked her, curling around her mind like smoke. The ground beneath her felt too real, too solid, yet a sense of dread pulsed through it. With a deep, trembling breath, she thrust the door open. It creaked, heavy like a coffin lid, revealing a dim room that felt more like a tomb than a sanctuary. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of decay. Flickers of light danced around her, illuminating strange artifacts scattered across the floor, dusty toys, faded photographs, and broken clocks frozen in time. Welcome home, Tammy, a voice whispered, sending a shiver down her spine. The shadows trembled at the threshold, cupping their dark claws against the doorway, drawn to the warmth she had brought inside. Confronted with her past, her heart surged with memories, her family, laughter, the weight of things she had buried deep. Brian. She screamed again, but the echoes swallowed her words. Where are you? As she stepped further into the room, the temperature dropped, urgency blossoming alongside terror. It felt like stepping into a memory, something ancient and forgotten, but alive with energy. The doll pulsed in her hands, as if aware of the torment swirling around her. A sudden crash, and a shadow darted past her, sending her heart racing as she turned. Who's there? She shouted, a mix of courage and fright shaking her voice. The entity had followed her, and in the corners of her eyes, she saw it slink like a panther, waiting. She spun back to the door, but it was already closing, vanishing, trapping her inside this haunted space. No. No. Panic clutched at her chest, choking her words. Just then, a flicker of movement caught her eye, a reflection in the cracked mirror hanging on the wall. She moved towards it, curiosity overriding fear. The mirror rippled as if the glass was water, and there, amidst the swirling reflections, she saw faces, people, some familiar, others distorted and twisted, wailing, pleading for freedom. Tammy, they chanted, voices merging in a cacophony that grew louder, each syllable picking at her sanity. They reached out, hands pressed against the glass, their desperate eyes pleading. Tammy staggered backward, gripping the doll tightly. "What do you want from me?" she cried, tears blurring her vision. The shadows had intensified, swirling around her like a tempest, and the walls trembled with their fury. "Your truth, your memories," the entity hissed from behind. "Release them." Tammy felt the pull, the weight of sorrow wrapped around her heart, a suffocating blanket of sadness pressing down. I can't. Desperation clawed at her throat. Release? The cost of freedom seemed too steep, and the faces in the mirror were twisted with pain, their suffering writ large with her own. With growing dread, she realized, to break free, she would have to confront the truth buried within her, the memories she had tried to forget. "Tammy." Brian's voice rang out again, sharper this time, and her eyes widened as she looked into the splintered reflection, a glimpse of him, fighting through the shadows. "Brian." She lunged towards the mirror, fists pounding against the cold glass. The shadows screamed, furious and violent, but the jagged edges began to crack, splintering under her raw need. Then, a blinding light erupted as the glass shattered in a storm of sparkling shards. It pulled her in, and everything around her exploded into darkness. "Tammy, you have to wake up." Another voice, was it Brian? She felt herself being pulled, not just from the physical world but from something deeper, an essence being stripped away. What awaited her on the other side? Did she have the strength to face the truth? Desperation filled her as she plunged into the light, the abyss closing behind her like a hungry mouth. The darkness lingered, waiting. What mayhem awaited her upon escaping? What sacrifices would she have to make to win back what she loved? The thrill of survival danced dangerously close, teasing a truth she had yet to uncover. Light exploded, blinding Tammy as she tumbled into the void. The sensation was overwhelming, as if she were being stretched across an infinite space. Sounds morphed into a chaotic din, whispers and screams merging into one entity, tugging at her very essence. When the light faded, she landed with a thud on what felt like cold, damp ground. Instinctively, she scrambled to her feet, breathlessly searching her surroundings. She was in a forest, dense and suffocating. Gnarled trees loomed above like skeletal giants, their branches twisting and clinging to one another, creating a canopy that swallowed the sky. The air was thick with decay, the scent of wet earth and something more sinister lurking beneath. "Brian!" she shouted, her voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. A cold wind rustled the leaves, almost laughing at her futile pleas. Panic surged through her as she recalled the desperate look in the mirror, the faces pleading for release. As she took a step forward, a chill crept up her spine. Something was watching her, eyes hidden behind the veil of shadows. She instinctively clutched the doll tighter, the frail thing feeling more like a talisman than a toy. With each heartbeat, the forest seemed to pulse, as if alive and breathing. Then came the sound, a branch snapping behind her. She whirled around, eyes wide, heart hammering like a drum. A figure emerged from the shadows, cloaked and silent, its face shrouded beneath a hood. It moved like smoke, gliding with an eerie grace, and her blood ran cold. What are you?" Tammy stammered, every instinct screaming to run. But her feet felt rooted to the ground, fear knotting her stomach. "Your memories have been severed but they remain." "Here," the figure rasped, voice echoing like gravel. As it spoke, the otherworldly whispers rose again, swirling around her like a storm, drowning out her thoughts. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, tearing her gaze away from the figure. The darkness felt thicker, the shadows more potent. The truth lies buried in your heart, it continued, stepping closer, its presence swallowing the light. Tammy felt the weight of the words, heavy and suffocating. You must face the shadows, confront them if you wish to find him. Brian. I just want Brian. Desperation turned her voice into a wail. The forest closed in, the trees seemed to listen and sigh, the echoes of her cries becoming one with the winds. The figure reached out, its hand brushing against her arm. Ice shot through her veins. She recoiled, but something in its grasp held her fast. You have a choice. Face your past, or remain here forever, lost to the darkness. The air crackled with tension. Tammy's mind raced, flee or fight. She could feel her memories clawing at her, whispers of happiness and pain mingling, creating a bitter concoction. Did she have the strength to confront what lay hidden? With a surge of determination mixed with terror, she sought deeper into the forest. If I have to find the truth to save him, then I will, she whispered to herself. She steeled her resolve, pushing the fear aside. But as she moved forward, the underbrush rustled violently behind her. A shadow loomed large, and the air fractured with a low growl. It wasn't just the figure anymore, she could sense others, lurking in the darkness, hungry. Tammy turned, eyes wide, breath shallow. Heart pounding, she took a step backward, feeling like prey in a predator's lair. What are you doing here? A new voice snapped, sharp and malicious, echoing through the trees like a death knell. A figure slipped into view, a park ranger, uniformed, but with eyes glazed and hollow. You shouldn't have come, it's too late for you. She was trapped between shadows and a wraith. Fear gripped her, choking her thoughts into a tangled mess. What terrible choice lay ahead? Did she dare confront these monstrous manifestations of her past, or would it consume her entirely? Turn back while you can, the ranger's voice dripped with disdain, an ominous promise of fates worse than death. As the shadows inched closer, her heart raced. Would she face the nightmares, or let them swallow her whole? Tammy. A familiar voice broke through the faint echo of Brian, lost somewhere in the depths of her memories. Would she brave the darkness to save him? But did she truly understand what lay ahead? The woods felt like a living, breathing entity, a dark heart thrumming with an insatiable hunger. Tammy's pulse quickened. She stood on a precipice, a battle raging not just outside, but within. The park ranger, this twisted version of authority, loomed closer, words sharp like barbs. They will claim you, he warned, voice low and threatening. Tammy's hands shook as she gripped the doll tighter. Memories flooded her mind. Laughter with Brian, Maggie's bright smile, moments of bliss that now felt like cruel taunts. She couldn't let them be lost forever. Brian. She called out again, desperation pouring from her. There was something different in the air now, a shift, a crack in the shadows. Suddenly, she felt warmth flickering inside her. I can't go back. Not without him. The ranger chuckled, a sound devoid of joy. Ha! You think your love can save you? The forest thrives on despair. And yet, amid her fear, a flame of defiance ignited. Tammy refused to let darkness prevail. Leave me alone. She shouted, voice trembling but fierce. The ranger stepped forward, shadows swirling around him like a storm. You cannot resist what you are. But his words lost their power. Tammy stepped forward, challenging the oppressive presence of the shadows. I am not my past. She declared, the echo of her own voice resonating deeper than the fear clawing at her heart. I will confront you. I will find Brian. With each word, the weight of despair lifted, no longer just chains but now stepping stones into courage. With fierce resolve, she pressed on, eyes narrowed to focus on the silhouettes merging into darkness. Shadows of the past loomed, memories warped and twisted, pain and joy, both demanding her attention. "Maggie! Brian!" She called again, feeling the words spiral through the density of the night. Suddenly, a flicker of warmth pulsed in the air. The laughter of the children danced through the heavy silence, sweet, innocent, and pure. "Mama!" Tammy's heart surged. That voice! "Maggie! Follow me!" came the beckoning, playful tone. She moved instinctively, heart racing as she pushed deeper into the forest's maze. Shadows shrieked as she went, trying to cage her in despair, but she pressed through, determined. "Tammy!" Then, Brian's voice rose above the whispering chaos. "I'm here. I'm still here." The light flickered within her. The very fabric of the forest began to tremble. The closer she got to the voice, the more the darkness shrank, writhing in anger. The twisted trees began to split, revealing a clearing bursting with radiant light. "Don't leave me!" Tammy urged as she dashed, fighting back every creeping shadow reaching for her, their hands clawing for the warmth of her spirit. She broke through the tight band of trees and into the clearing, heart hammering like a drum. And there they were. Brian sat against the base of a massive oak, little Maggie was cuddled in his arms, asleep, a peaceful expression on her face. Relief washed over Tammy like a wave. "Maggie!" She rushed forward, but the shadows lunged, howling as if in pain at the light that spilled from the clearing. "Stay away from her!" Tammy shouted. The forest trembled in response, shadows retreating but not without fury. Brian's tired eyes locked onto her, filled with hope and fear. "Tammy!" Tears streamed down her face. I'm here. I've come for you both." Suddenly, the whispers crescendoed, rising in a haunting symphony, demanding, pleading. The darkness swirled and whispered the very insecurities she had buried, threats sliding through the air. "Join us in despair." "No!" Tammy screamed, clenching the doll tightly. "You don't own me. I choose hope." In a surge of emotional clarity, Tammy faced the shadows, driven by a love that throbbed with power. She lifted the doll high, light radiating from it, flooding the clearing. The shadows writhed in agony, howling with rage. They couldn't withstand the strength of a mother's love. The light erupted, pushing forward, bright and blinding. The forest crackled as the shadows recoiled, twisting away from their power. Tammy felt the warmth envelop her, like a protective shield. She reached for Maggie and Brian, drawing them close, their love pulsing together, merging in light. And then, in a blinding flash, the forest shattered. Light exploded from the heart of the darkness, scattering the shadows like leaves in a storm. The echoes of despair faded, replaced with clarity so potent it washed over her in waves. Tammy blinked, eyes adjusting to the bright, warm sun. They stood in a sunlit field, the oppressive forest vanished. She looked down to see Maggie safe in her arms, Brian standing beside her with a tight grip on her hand. Relief washed over them like a soothing balm. "I thought." Brian gasped, eyes wide as realization bathed their moment. "We really did it," Tammy breathed, squeezing Maggie a little tighter, her heart swelling with gratitude. "I was so scared," Maggie mumbled, blinking awake. "You're okay, love." "We're all okay," Tammy whispered, brushing the hair from her daughter's face, everything precious and tangible, the past finally laid to rest. Together they stepped forward, united, and as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky with pastel colors of hope, they knew their bond was forever strong. The forest had lost, but they had triumphed together. And as the last remnants of the shadows faded into memory, a promise lingered in the air. The love they carried forged a path through the darkest of woods. Now that you've reached this thrilling conclusion, do not wait. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss our next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support means everything. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this intense ending. And remember, it's time to instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't let them be left in the dark. This is the moment to show your support.